Thank you for that introduction. My Aramb with the Tryst that I had with the Whites started way back in December 1996, where I became the lowest form of marine life, which is a cadet in the Navy. Cadets, as a matter of fact, are brought down to very basic, very essential requirements. And when military training takes over, it ensures that everybody is grounded and leveled. That's why I call this phase as the first element, that is the earth. But then, as part of military training, when you are in a group, the military training ensures that the ego is subdued. When the ego gets subdued, actually the I, the individual I, starts transcending to we. That's the time when you start identifying more as a group or as a team instead of an individual. And the we, in our case, is usually the course or batch that you belong to. I belong to the 13th Naval Engineering course, and ours was a scheme where we were expected to earn our bachelor's in engineering along with the grind of cadets training for not 1 or 2, but a good 3.5 years. We got trained in a place called Lonavala near Pune. And while it's a hill station, it was a hill station for us during our initial training days. But yes, it's actually mesmerizing in the monsoons. And we had our share of fun and frolic like this. And for a good part of the year, the climate is quite salubrious, as what we used to say. As part of our training, we had attachments to the fleet. And the next picture is one that I have, wherein we were on a ship, and it was in the summer of 1997. I am showing this picture to you because there are 2 of my friends, course-mates here, who have been Gallantry Award winners. One laid his life down to save his shipmate at sea, and the other belongs to this very city. He became a Marine Commando and then earned his medal while doing counter-insurgency operations in the Kashmir Valley. We also used to have many activities as part of our training, and of which weapon training was an important part. And what we loved most about weapon training was posing with the weapons. In fact, when we were training at that point in time, our training coordinator, as what we used to call him, told us that the main job of his was to make officers out of us, gentlemen next, and engineers if time permitted. I must say that I barely managed to scrape through on all these counts, and became a midshipman on the 1st of July 2000. I remember the date very clearly, because that was the time I stopped being the lowest form of marine life. This is a picture with me and my parents on that particular day. Then was becoming sub-lieutenants in the Navy, which is basically getting the President's Commission. Young and brimming here. After that, graduation and specialization courses. Most importantly, during this time, I had a personal issue in that sense that my father was diagnosed with renal failure, and he was placed on the dangerously ill list. This required blood transfusion, and 18 of us were at that point in time doing a course in Pune. 13 of them ended up donating blood for my father. I'm saying this because this is the kind of brotherhood that gets created in the Navy, or in the military, as a matter of fact. So this was the first major takeaway for me, that these bonds of brotherhood that go through sweat and grime by far become the strongest. We finished our courses, moved on to the fleet, and I was fortunate to serve on an aircraft carrier. During this time, I was selected for Navy level shooting championship, which is played with service weapons. For me, it was a getaway from the ship routine. Not exactly a correct way to take one's responsibility, but yes, I was firing 3 different weapons, but that I did diligently. And to my utter surprise, I was the only one in this entire team who could manage 2 medals, 1 gold and 1 bronze. And our team also managed to lift the banner amongst the 3 teams that were participating. Herein came my next important takeaway. That is that if you get an opportunity, just grab it. Put in your efforts. Once you do that, you will realize that you are good at so many other things which you would never have thought of. Always give yourself that particular chance. I finished this, I went on for submarine training, and for submariners, the most memorable part of the training is escape training. Escape training is basically when a submarine gets sunk, it is not able to come back to the surface. There are generally 2 methods of moving out of the submarine. One is through the torpedo tubes, and the other is through conning tower, which is the access for the submarine. Both these methods are taught in dry methods as well as with water. And in case of an escape tower, what we generally do is we get into a compression chamber. We are pressurized to a value that corresponds to the height of water in the tower, and then you are made to rise up through this tower. It's quite a liberating feeling there. And this is an image where I moved up and finished my training and then moved on for my time on diesel electric submarines. I came back as an instructor for submariners in the submarine training school and went for my master's. Finished my master's, and then I was posted on board a submarine as the engineer officer. This was a turning point in my naval career. As an engineer officer, I was one of the 3 heads of departments after the commanding officer, and the responsibility is quite huge. I hadn't realized that gravity at that point in time. I needed to put in a lot of effort and go back to basics, but I didn't do it to the extent that it required. Be that as it may, there was one point in time wherein my personal issues clashed with professional pressures, and something in me just snapped. I didn't realize it until an officer whom I used to report to on technical matters asked me, "What do you think is good in you?" And I was blank. At that point in time, I realized that my self-esteem has become 0. But then I had some time before I could find myself back and put myself into the shape that I had to be in. This went on for almost a year. This kind of pressures that I had seen were slightly, they were not very normal for operational tenures in submarine or in the Navy. But then by the end of 1 year, I did get the opportunity to move on for a different class of submarines, which was being inducted into the Navy for the first time. The propulsion technology was absolutely new, and there was not much of experience which we had in this case. This was more than a golden opportunity for me, and I just dived into training myself, reading all the manuals that I could lay my hands on. I was getting back to the basics. At the same time, I also had the job of finding myself up and bringing myself up to the stage where I always had in my own eyes. At this point in time, I spent a lot of time contemplating what and how and what went wrong. And thereafter, I took some deliberate steps to move ahead. I took some deliberate steps to undo certain flaws that I had earlier. So by the end of the time I finished training, 2 things happened. I stood first on that course, and secondly, I was one of the fastest guys around. Herein was the third takeaway. That is, it's never too late to start again. It all depends on how and what do you prioritize. I moved on to this new class of submarines, this new platform. There were challenges galore because there was not much of experience, but we had to make things move. My practical training was exponential on all fronts: operations, maintenance, team management, because simply I was better prepared, I was more confident. And one thing that I learned during this course is that I learned to say no whenever something exceeded my threshold levels. It's very important because many of us try to comply and comply and comply, but then at some point in time, you need to put your foot down and say that that's enough, I need to move ahead. I must tell you here that in case of ships and submarines, a lot of organizations toil actually to make it sail, make her sail. But then the ultimate risk lies with the crew that sails her out. It's like being a soldier on the front, where you're always in line for the enemy. It becomes even more difficult in case of a new platform, because there is no history for you to back on. There are no procedures to look at. There is nothing for you to look back and follow. So in such a case, every activity has a first time. Every activity begins with the first time. The first time, the boat. We fondly call a submarine as a boat. The boat sails out. She dives, reaches for the depths, proves her systems, speeds, equipment, weapons, and then ticks off all her requirements. At this point in time, the team that makes this happen does this with a lot of butterflies in their stomach. But then, when you achieve whatever targets have set in front of you, the entire team enjoys each and every moment, which is almost subliminal. These moments get etched in their hearts and minds, and I have been blessed to be a part of such a team. This was that team. Finally, my time on board that submarine was up. And the last day that I stepped down, I really had a lump in my throat. I never felt this in any of my previous tenures. Not even the time when I wore my uniform for the last time. But this was actually special because there were a series of us that we had seen through. At this point, all my firsts I had to put behind. And then I had to look back, and then I realized that every journey, however extraordinary that it might be, has to terminate at some point, and then you will have to usher in new beginnings, your Aramb again. So I moved on to a training establishment, and then I got busy training them, but still there was something amiss. I was basically missing the thrill I used to get from the series of firsts. So I took that call of moving out of the Navy. In fact, that was probably one of the toughest decisions that I ever took in my life. Probably tougher than deciding to get married to my better half. Because the Navy is not just a job. It is a way of life. I'm saying that even after having retired out. This is a picture of me training fellow submariners on a simulator. And then I went ahead, put up my papers for retirement, and this was the last day of mine in uniform. I knew I would miss that uniform so very dearly, but then I had to make a choice. So don't be afraid to make a choice, as long as it has been in all earnestness, with the right attitude and a sense of gratitude. You need to move ahead. You need to develop this ability to look at both sides of the coin. That will give you a sense of balance And above all, you should learn to understand the goodness of bad, because that is trying to teach you that you're not yet comfortable with. A word of caution here to all of you. Ambition is very important because that is what will keep you motivated. But at the same time, it is even more important that that ambition is firm on your first principles, your ethics, those that define your individuality. It is going to be a constant battle here, but then you will have to find your ways and means of coming back to your path and keeping your focus on every time. Remember that it's only you who is responsible for whatever you did or you did not, and nobody else. And this has been my biggest takeaway from my time on submarines and in the Navy. This is best summed up in the words of William Ernest Henley in his poem Invictus. The last 4 lines say, "It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment is the scroll. I am the master of my fate, and I am the captain of my soul." And as a submariner, I will always wish that the number of times you surface is always equal to the number of your dives. Thank you.